Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Schau, lieber Gott, wie, meine, Feind, which translates to, Behold, dear God, how my enemies. This is the first chorale that I'm looking at, as yesterday I got back from vacation. I was monitoring the YouTube channel as the videos were uploading, and I was happy to see that I had scheduled them properly, so if I have to take any breaks in the future, I'll record more videos in advance so that the daily upload schedule doesn't get compromised. But we have a relatively short chorale today. There's some interesting harmonic moments in this chorale, namely around the beginning of the second system, but we're just going to hop right into it. One sharp in the key signature, we start on E major and end on E major. Very fascinating as well. I reckon we're starting in the key of A minor. We see that we have F, I thought we had an F natural at this point. We have F sharps, what am I trying to say here? The only F sharp that we have is leading up until the cadence, and that is a harmonization of the melodic minor scale. So the fact that Fs are avoided almost entirely it's pretty cool. Wondering why the key signature is even necessary, but with F sharp, it means that Bach doesn't have to write out all of the auxiliary raised sixth scale degrees, which is not the first time Bach has done this, but it definitely is on the more uncommon side. So we start off on E major, E, E, G sharp, and B. That is a 5 chord. We have A, E, A, and C. That's A minor, which is our tonic and root position. And then we have B, D, G sharp, and B. That's G sharp G sharp diminished in first inversion. And we would expect a tonic triad in first inversion after that. C, E, A, and A, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. That 1-7-6-1 progression, or the reverse, 1-6-7-6-1, is a hallmark of Bach's chorale harmonizations. We see them all the time in different keys, or it's really just a chord and a chord in first inversion separated by a diatonic step below it in first inversion. So sometimes we see like 5-4-6, 5-6, or 4-6, 3-6, 3, or 4. Progressions like that we see quite often. It's a way to ascend the bass line in stepwise motion. We then have B, D, G sharp, and E. That is E7 over B, which is 5-4-3 chord because it's in second inversion. Then we have 3 passing tones in the lower of the 3 voices, and when there's more than 2 voices moving, I tend to look to see if there's any subdivision of the harmonic rhythm, which in this case there is. There's A minor, A, C, A, and E, so we have a passing tonic triad, and I'll mark that because 5 typically wants to go to 1, so I'd say that this is a subdivided chord progression. We then have G sharp, B, B, and E. That's another 5 chord. This time it's in first inversion. Passing 7th in the melody. A, C, E, and C. That's A minor in root position. That's our tonic triad. Passing tones in the inner voices before we cadence on E major, E, E, G sharp, and B, which is our 5 chord, making this a half cadence. Okay, looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. Notice how we have F naturals throughout, here, 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 further solidifying the idea of A minor throughout the A section. So from 5 we have kind of an interesting progression. We have B, F natural, G, and D, which is G7 in first inversion. That would be 7, 6, 5. Sometimes people analyze these G major triads in a minor context as secondary dominance of 3, and the chord very much resolves as if it were resolving to C major, but we get A in the alto here, meaning that really this is just a subtonic 7th. It's not functioning there. I don't think you can make an argument that it has any ulterior function. But it does go to, like I said, A minor in first inversion, C, E, A, and C, which is a tonic triad in first inversion. Passing tone in the bass before we get E, E, G sharp, and B. That's another 5 chord, our dominant. Passing 7th in the tenor, and then we have F natural, C, A, and A with a passing tone in the alto. That's F major in root position. A bit of a deceptive progression here, 5 going to 6. And then we have kind of a contrapuntal slurry here. We have E, D, F, and B, and that in and of itself is not an analyzable triad, which makes me feel like this E is an accented non-chord tone, and the reason why I think this E is our culprit rather than any of the other tones is because D, D, F, and B spells B diminished in first inversion. We have a bout of adjacent harmony where the chords are next to one another in the scale. However, when this B occurs, we get C and D very shortly afterwards. So I kind of hear this as adjacent harmony, but I think another valid analysis might be 4-7 because we have D, D, F natural, and C. So a 4-7 chord might be another valid analysis as well. It really just depends on how you hear the harmony. I think 7 is probably the stronger of the analyses, but the counterpoint in the melody versus what's going on in the bass does create some disagreement. We really don't have a clear answer as to what chord is being implied, just some theories. We then have E, G sharp, E, and C. This G sharp is like a inverted suspension. I think there's a word for that, but resolves upwards to what our chord tone actually is. It's A natural, making this E, A, E, and C, which is A minor in second inversion. So 1-6-4, usually that's paired with 5, E, G sharp, E, and B, this A, this syncopation here where we get A on 1 and to 2 and creates another non-chord tone on the beat. But we know that 5 is being implied, E, G sharp, E, and B. And 1-6-4 and 5 are often bracketed together to show their relationship with one another because second inversion triads are pretty uncommon. They're pretty uncommon, all things considered. Really, 1-6-4 chords are the most common of the 6-4 chords I've found. You don't really see them in other contexts. Seldom do you see them. I mean, it's not unprecedented. You do see them. They're just by far the least common of the triads you see in the middle of the progression. Usually you see them in a cadential context, hence the name cadential 6-4. And then we cadence on A minor, A, C, E, and A, which is our tonic triad. It's a very common cadential formula. Okay, looking ahead, we have a half cadence in the key of E minor. So we're not going to G just yet. We are going to E. And I think we modulate straight off the bat. We could make the argument that this D major chord is a 4 chord, but I think this is more of a direct modulation. This really sounds like it's just going to go to G major, especially after the break. So this D major chord, F sharp, A, D, and A would be 7-6 in the key of E minor, or you could analyze it as 5-6 of 3, and in this case I think both analyses are accurate because they do go to 3, G, G, D, and B, which is our 3 chord in the key of E minor. And then we have 4 voices that are moving, which means that there's typically a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm here. We have F sharp, A, D sharp, and A, which is D sharp diminished in first inversion, that's 7-6. And 3 going to 7 is an example of a transitive progression, but I think Bach normalized 3 going to 7. We see it a lot in his music. It's not the most common chord progression by any stretch of the imagination, but it's somewhere in the middle. It's somewhat uncommon to common, somewhere in that classification. But 7-6 goes where we expect to our tonic triad, E minor, E, B, E, and G. 3 really here is just a substitute for E minor in first inversion, right? Just like how we have this progression here that I say is a standard in Bach, 1-6-7-6-1, 3-7-6-1 is just a variation on that. The only 2 notes that are different are D versus E in the G minor or the G major triad. We then have B, B, D sharp, remember it carries over, and F sharp, which is our dominant B major, passing 7th in the bass, and then we have G, B, E, and E, which is E minor in first inversion, that's 1-6, and then we have 4 more voices moving off of the harmonic rhythm. So another subdivision of the harmony here, we have F sharp, A, D sharp, remember it carries over, and F sharp, which is D sharp diminished in first inversion, it's a 7-6 chord. We're seeing the same progression here, but with the 1-6 chord happening over a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm, just like how it does at the beginning of the bar. And in the next bar, the beginning of the system, we get E, B, E, and G, which is E minor in root position. That's a 1 chord. Passing 7th in the bass, this G is actually a chord tone, sorry. mark that in my notes, but it should not be marked. And then we have C, C, F sharp, and A. We could make the argument that this is a F sharp diminished triad, which would be 2 in second inversion, but I think it's more likely that this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone. This is actually A minor in first inversion, which would be 4-6, A, S, C, C, E, and A. And the reason why is because this is a half cadence, B, F sharp, D sharp, and B, which is a cadence on 5, and this is a particular type of half cadence called a Phrygian half cadence. Now 2-6-4 and 4-6 are effectively the same chord. They share 2 notes in common, they share a bass, and they function the same as predominance. However, in the vast majority of cases, in the cases of Phrygian half cadences, that is, 4-6 is always somewhere in the texture. Depending on what voices are presenting notes, you might see a 2-6-4 or 2-4-3 chord in the mix as well, depending on whether you have some stepwise motion in one of the voices, just like what's happening here where we have F sharp and E, which muddies the analysis a bit. But I think 4-6 is the more common of the 2 chords to occur, and if that is a chord that can be extrapolated from the texture, like in this case, then it should be analyzed. But really the important thing is that there's half-step motion in the bass. We have C going to B natural, which is what creates the Phrygian feel, because the Phrygian mode is hallmarked by the fact that it has a half-step between its second and first degrees. Okay, looking ahead, we have an interesting chord progression and kind of a forced modulation here, because Bach modulates over what I'm saying, where I think he's modulating, is over an uncommon chord. But I think we modulate straight away to the key of A minor, and our phrase ends in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. We have E, E, B, and G natural. So that would be our tonic triad. So the chord modulates where we would expect it to. The chord resolves where we would expect it to. B major goes to E minor, and I think this is where we go to the key of A minor over a minor 5. And the reason why I think we modulate to A minor over this E minor chord is because it's easier to justify this modulation than it is to modulate over a chord with an F natural. F natural is not diatonic to the key of E minor, and even though Bach does very rarely use modality very directly in the chorales, this chord doesn't really seem like a strong pivot point. I think when we see minor 5, we often see it paired in the context with other natural chords in the scale. So we don't see 5 often go to a chord that involves a leading tone, or we don't often see 5 resolve to the tonic. It's purely being used as a diatonic voicing of a minor 5 chord. That's it, because if the leading tone is artificial, so when we don't see the leading tone in a 5 chord, it's usually a chord that goes to an adjacent harmony like 4 or 6, or anywhere other than the tonic. And that's exactly how it's functioning here. And this F natural has been important in further contextualizing A minor earlier in the chorale, so I reckon that we're in A minor at this point. You could even make the argument that this is a direct modulation, but I think 5 going to 1 is something that happens, and it's likely that this chord is functioning as a common chord because of it. So it's fascinating that minor 5 is being used here, and it just sounds like it's being used here, because this F natural is a very abrupt sound if you don't take into consideration the fact that this is in fact a common chord. We also have a passing 7th here in the tenor, which you could argue is also another chord. You could say that this is G rather than E minor, but this just sounds like an E minor triad to me. Oh no, you can't make that argument. That's a passing 7th, because this is not G in the bass, this is E in the bass. Strike that from the record. Apologies for confusing anyone. We have F natural, C, A, and A, which is F major in root position, so we have 5 going to 6, and not any type of raised 6. We have natural 6. We have passing tones here in the tenor and the melody, which does give us a bit of a 2 chord here. F natural, D, A, and B. That would be like a B minor 7 flat 5 over F, and 6 does want to go to 2, but I don't really think it's super important. It doesn't really create a chord progression that I see coming to fruition anywhere, but it is there in the texture. Ultimately, I think it sounds more like we have 6 going back to 1 again. F going down to C in the bass is what I hear more than the upper moving voices, so I don't think it, like I said, contributes too much to the chord progression. We have C, E, A, and C. It's A minor in first inversion. That's a 1-6 chord, so 6 going to 1 is relatively uncommon. We typically see 6, especially when the F is in the bass, go to 1 when it's connected via the leading tone, but notice how this is a natural 6, and it goes down, like he descends a perfect fourth. So I think that that's ultimately the reason why he does it, just a bass movement convention. Passing tone in the bass before we get E, E, G sharp, and B. And by this point we're pretty clearly in the key of A minor, no real deviations anymore. We then have A, E, A, and C, which is A minor in root position. 3 voices. Let's see if there's any movement or any chord changes. We have B, D, A, and B, so not really an analyzable chord. We could say that that's kind of like a 7 chord, especially because it goes to another tonic triad in first inversion here, C, C, E, and A, but we don't have the G sharp here to fully present it, the chord in its entirety, so I'm not going to mark it. We'll just talk about the fact that there's kind of an allusion to a dominant functioning chord happening between them without what really makes the chord dominant, which is the leading tone. So that's why I'm not analyzing it. It's because the leading tone's not present. It's around it. We have it here, and then we have the dominant here, but there's nothing in between, so only an illusion. Passing tone in the bass before we get E, B, E, and G sharp. That is a 5 chord, E major. And then we cadence on A minor, A, C, E, and A. Alright, we have some chromaticism in the bass here in our last phrase. We even have a B flat there, which is interesting. We end, sorry, not in a perfect authentic cadence. I am still in vacation mode and on autopilot, but this is a half cadence, actually, which is very interesting. Like I said at the beginning of the chorale, we start on 5 and end on 5, and I think that this has to do mostly with the movement number. I haven't listened to the entirety of the cantata, but the cantata ends in a half cadence, and when we have a chorale as an opening movement, which is relatively uncommon, this could potentially spell where the harmony is going in the next movement, as opposed to a chorale that is the last movement of a cantata or just a work in general that ends on a half cadence. That would be very unusual. This is less usual, or less unusual. It's something that not necessarily would be expected, but much more logically justifiable. We have another A minor triad here, A, C, E, and A, just the bass leaps up an octave, no need to reanalyze. G sharp, B, E, and E, that's E major over G sharp, that's 5-6. Then we have A minor, A, E, and C, another tonic triad. Passing 7th in the bass, F, A, F, and D, that's D minor in first inversion, 4-6. Passing tone in the bass before we get D, B flat, G, and E. You could make the argument that that's an E minor 7 flat 5 chord, which would be very unusual in the key of A minor, but I think the C sharp actually is what we're looking for here. We have C sharp, B flat, G, and E, which is C sharp fully diminished 7th. That would be the leading tone chord of 4, because C sharp's the leading tone to D, which is our subdominant. We then have D, A, F sharp, and D. Again, with this interesting false relation, we have F natural at the beginning of the progression and F sharp at the end of, well, I guess this fragment of the entirety of the progression. That's D major in root position, which would be an uppercase 4 chord. Then we have 2 non-chord tones happening here, 1 passing tone and 1, I guess that's one definition for appoggiatura, when you step out, step and then leap, leap and then step in the opposite direction. Don't quote me on that though, because I typically analyze appoggiaturas as strong beat non-chord tones, or accented non-chord tones where they happen on the beat, typically 1. But this is actually kind of like it's an E7 chord. E, G sharp, and D. It's incomplete, but still a 5-4-2 chord. Sorry, I wrote 4-4-2. It's actually a 5-4-2 chord. And in the context of a cadence, we would expect 4 to go to 5. I mean, even outside of the context of a cadence, we would expect 4 to go to 5, or some type of dominant functioning chord. So 5-4-2 following 4, and have it happening on a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm makes sense. That's why I'd mark it. We then have D sharp, F sharp, A, and C. That's another fully diminished 7th chord. In this case, we're looking at the leading tone to 5, so this is 7/7 of 5 here, and we just have this chromatically ascending bass line of C sharp, D, D sharp, and E, which ends our chorale, E, G sharp, E, and B, marking our half cadence. Definitely something unusual that we don't see at the end of the chorale, but the fact that it's the first movement really explains why. I would imagine the next movement coming in the key of maybe E major, coming in the key of E minor, or most likely in the key of A minor. I haven't looked at the rest of the cantata to have that information, but knowing, using inference about the fact that it is the first movement leads me to that conclusion. But on that note, I'm going to cap off the video. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. If you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, I upload a video once a day where I analyze a chorale, and we're closing in on episode 200. We're almost halfway through all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, so there's tons of journey left, tons of videos on the horizon. If you'd like to follow along, consider subscribing, consider hitting the notification icon as well to notify you when I upload. But other than that, again, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.